everyone! It's so special, they make me more and more special, to be Filipino is something I take so much pride in.
We're so proud of you. We're super proud of you, Alex. Thank you very much, Alex. Thank you.
Today, I extend my congratulations.
Explosive physically, President Marcos silences Thai journalist after a startling assault on Alex Eala's gold at the ancient SEA Games. Greetings from Champions Tennis again, where we present to you the tales that matter, the instances that characterize champions, and the drama that nobody else is brave enough to cover. And allow me to say what I'm going to tell you, it's completely unprecedented today. This isn't limited to sports news. This isn't only political drama. This is a time when we'll be taught at colleges of journalism, discussed in diplomatic settings, and seen again in highlight reels for future generations. We are discussing a confrontation between athletic and national pride perfection, as well as unadulterated raw presidential authority that just declined at the 33rd Southeast Asian Games in Thailand. And believe me when I say that you've never seen something like this before. Imagine this situation, if you will. A crowded audience for a press presentation in Bangkok. The cameras and lighting are hot, are seated in the middle and rolling. Of it all is 20-year-old Alexa, the Philippines' pride, with a gold medal shining around her neck. She's worn out, passionate, and radiant with the joy of having a dream come true. Only a few steps away is Ferdinand Marcos Jr., the president, head of state of the Philippines, there to observe history and provide support to his athletes of the nation. Everything seems too typical, even joyous, until an experienced Thai journalist seizes the microphone and initiates what can only be characterized as a verbal murder make an effort with this young champion. The space tenses, the atmosphere thickens, and then in a moment that no one anticipated, the Philippine president rises, physically marches across that room, tears the microphone from the hands of a journalist, and provides 12 icy remarks that will reverberate sports history indefinitely. Women, and this is the whole and censored version, guys. Shocking tale of the day, President Marcos really subdued his detractors to keep Alexa safe. Let's go back and adjust the stage appropriately, as you must comprehend the prepared powder keg to blow up in Bangkok during these previous 2 weeks. The 33rd Southeast Asian Games have not been amicable at all. Yes, in theory, these regional competitions are meant to honor harmony, good sportsmanship, and the spirit of athletic brilliance in the Southeast Asia. However, anybody who has been making payments attention is aware that when patriotism is at stake, when host countries have home court advantage, as well as when performance pressure reaches a fever pitch, things may quickly get nasty. Additionally, in the globe of tennis during these matches, everything was coming together. Unavoidable confrontation. Thailand entered these games with high anticipation. The host country always does. They had the crowds, they had the infrastructure, and they had athletes that were eager to demonstrate their worth on their own territory. The National Tennis Development Center is in Bangkok, turned as their stronghold and location, where each Thai player's point the athlete was greeted by loud roars, and each mistake made by a rival was commemorated as a personal triumph. The atmosphere was electrifying, yet also aggressive, frightening, and sometimes rather unjust. This wasn't just home court advantage. This was a zone of psychological warfare. Additionally, standing amidst all of this turmoil was Alex. Now, for those who may not be acquainted with this ultimate superstar, allow me to quickly enlighten you. Alex isn't simply a random tennis player who got fortunate. Right now, she is ranked 53rd worldwide. Give it some thought. The world number 53. She has participated in WTA competitions. Tour. She received training at the Rafa Nadal Spain's academy, and she's been holding 110 people's aspirations and wishes. She has been carrying 1 million Filipinos since she was an adolescent. Entering these Southeast Asian Games, she wasn't only a favorite. She was the overpowering, unquestionably the clear favorite to win gold in the tournament for women's singles. However, the problem with being the favorite, particularly when you're in a hostile area, the objective on your back becomes enormous. The Philippine delegation was aware of what they were entering. They were aware that each match would be difficult, not just against competent opponents, but facing throngs of people who want nothing more rather than see their precious princess fall apart. They were aware of the tremendous strain. They were also aware that Alex Eala was carrying the significance of history due to the Philippines has not won a gold medal in women's tennis in singles at the SEA Games since 1999. That equates to 26 years of waiting, disappointment, of close calls, and heartache. 26 years is a whole generation. Athletes that weren't even born during the last time the Philippines won this gold were now vying for it. The drought has become a national concern. Alex Eala was the only individual who may put a stop to it. As the competition, Ella was completely clinical as she advanced. Not only did she win games, but she dominated them. During the quarterfinals, she defeated her opponent with precise accuracy, hardly shattering a perspiration. The semifinals were more of the same. Her forehand was a mass weapon. Devastation. The way she moved around the court was a moving work of poetry. Her thought's toughness was unbreakable. With every triumph, the thrill and the tension increased as the Philippines expanded. In Thailand, the home audience was beginning to fulfill their aspirations of a Thai gold medals were disappearing, being captured by this occurrence in the Philippines who seems unstoppable. By the time we achieved the championship, the mood had came to a boiling pitch. Alex Eala was scheduled to take against Thailand's Manenka Sawini Last Hope. The player, their local hero, he carried the burden of a whole country yelling her name. The stadium was overcrowded. Each seat was filled. There were people standing in the aisles. The sound was unbelievably deafening. The Thai drums were beating, beats that rocked the foundations of the structure. Chants reverberated across the rafters. Additionally, each and every time Alex Eala volunteered to help, each and every time as she was ready to hit the ball, the audience would erupt in jeers as they attempted to disrupt her focus, attempting to toss she's not playing at her best. This wasn't sportsmanship. It was psychological combat. And when seated in the VIP area, seeing the development of all of this, President Bongbong Marcos was the source of anxiety. Himself. He had traveled to Thailand in particular to assist the Filipino athletes, an act that many in the media had been portrayed as normal, a typical look of a diplomat. However, people that are familiar with Marcos know that he has a purpose for everything it does. He was present because he comprehended the importance of this particular time. He was there in order to transmit the Philippines' message behind its supporters. Additionally, as occurrences will quickly demonstrate that he was there to something that no president of the Philippines has before accomplished. The gold award, the actual match, was a full-scale conflict. This wasn't a game of tennis. This was gladiatorial fighting under the cover of athletics. Manenka Sawini participated in her own match. Life. Driven by the frenzied intensity of with thousands of yelling admirers, she was recovering balls that ought to have been winners. She was drawing comparisons with unattainable accuracy. She was eating off each and every shout, cheer, and her supporters' frantic appeal. However, Alex Eala was a completely different person. She was frigid. In light of intense animosity, dubious line calls that seemed to consistently favor the home player, as well as persistent efforts, Eala never gave in to intimidation. Never once. There were times when it tested her determination. A series in the second set, most really horrible calls made by the linesmen started a heated dispute on the court. The coaching staff from the Philippines was furious, pointing to markings on the clay, requiring evaluations that were not given inexplicably. The throng was pounding for blood, realizing that their athlete could really pull off a miracle if the authorities continued to assist. However, this is what sets champions apart from everyone else. Rather of allowing she is consumed with controversy rather than Alex crumbling beneath the strain, Eala let all of her rage out into her racket. She began striking winners who were really tidy, so unquestionably, even the most prejudiced, they could not be called out by linesmen. She started methodically dismantling her opponent, game by game, point by point, till there was no more uncertainty in anyone's opinion on who was superior participant. When she eventually hit that championship forehand later on, a shot that painted the corner with a bullet and won the game at 6-1, 6-2. It was a visceral discharge of emotion. Alex Eala fell to her knees on the court. Tears, her racket slipping from her hands, running down her cheeks. She had completed the task. Despite all the odds, against a hostile crowd, protesting dubious officiating, against the strain of 26 years of the past, she had won. The gold, she had the medal. It was no longer a drought. There was a champion from the Philippines. However, as anyone who watches sports is aware, occasionally, the drama begins when the game concludes. There was a chilly handshake at the net, as well as pre-functor. The award ceremony was tight and uncomfortable. The authorities from Thailand seemed to be in agony as they gave the gold medal to the Filipino celebrity as if it violently harmed them in order to recognize her triumph. The audience, which had been so loud throughout the game, was now unsettlingly silent, their disappointment lingering like smoke in the air. However, the actual storm, the real dispute, had barely begun. To brew in the conference room for the press, where the media from all around the globe was congregating. Press conferences at important sports events are often simple affairs. Sitting at a table, athletes respond to inquiries about their performance, please their fans and coaches, and everyone returns home content. However, this press conference was not the same as it was then. It began. The anxiety was palpable. Throughout the space, the journalists from Thailand were tending to their injured pride. The worldwide media detected blood in the water. And Alexa, still sporting her gold medal, still shining with the joy of winning, but I had no notion what was going to strike her. Go in Suyakan. Additionally, if you are unaware of this, let me give you a picture of what a guy is. A giant of Thai journalism is Suasilan. He has decades of experience in the industry. In Southeast Asia, he is well known for his aggressive manner of interviewing, his unwillingness to give up on anybody, and his reputation for posing inquiries that people are too scared to inquire. He spoke with prime ministers, he's questioned business leaders, and he's made lawmakers squirm in their chairs. With his sharp interrogation, he's not someone who is easily scared. Moreover, he is most definitely not a player. Pleasant when he perceives vulnerability. He is the kind of reporter who notices a young and emotional athlete is a prime target. Since Alex Eala took a seat at the podium, surrounded by her coaches, and she seemed joyful yet exhausted, authorities. She was prepared to discuss her approach, her instruction, and the assistance from returning at home as normal. However, the Suka Yoon sprang to her feet and grasped the enthusiasm in the room. The microphone moved. This was not going to be a typical news conference. This was going to be a surprise attack. According to many witnesses present in that space, what followed was startling, even by the combat sports standards journalism. Yoon did not begin with a query. He launched an assault first. He was started by undermining the triumph, discussing how the draw had gone favorable, how some players had been wounded, how fortunate they had been. Part in the result. Then he began hinting at the officiating, strangely implying that it may have really preferred despite the obvious proof that she had engaged in combat regarding prejudiced calls made during the competition. The gaslighting of the highest order, making an effort to rewrite the story of what everyone had just observed. Then he went further, however. He became intimate. He began assaulting the persona of Alexa. He asked her sportsmanship. He chastised her festivities as insulting to the host country. He implied that her in some way, victory was not genuine, that she wasn't really deserving of the gold medal around her throat. And he carried out all of this not as inquiries, but as charges. His tone was full with disdain. With little disguised disdain. This wasn't journalism. It was a character. Live broadcast of an assassination to millions of viewers around the Southeast Asia. There was silence in the room. Other journalists, including a few from Thailand, seemed uneasy. It was crossing a statement that qualified reporters comprehend is present even in the most press conferences that are competitive. You are able to pose challenging queries. You have the option to challenge stories, but you don't attack the 20-year-old sportsman who recently attained the greatest triumph of her life. Alex Eala's expression, which had been so happy moments before, started to fall. The grin vanished. Her gaze began to sparkle with new tears. However, these were no longer happy tears. These were tears of pain and perplexity. She sought assistance from her coaches, but they seemed to be just as shocked as she was. How do you protect yourself against such obvious animosity that is camouflaged as aggression as a media investigation? Kalin was tenacious. He continued. He raised his voice and pointed at her, obviously becoming into a morally upright rage for the camera's benefit. He was entertaining, putting up a show for the audience at home, providing them with the conflict they desired since they couldn't achieve the triumph they wanted. He intended to turn this Filipino girl into pay for having the gall to prevail on Thai territory. He intended to shatter her, shut down live broadcasting, and bring back some shame and a feeling of pride in Thailand. However, he made one crucial arithmetic error. He didn't remember who else was in the room. Bongbong Marcos, the president, had been silently seated to the side of the podium, preserving the honorable position required of a head of state at an international athletic competition. He had been grinning when it was appropriate, nodding in response to more queries, assuming the role of the encouraging watcher. However, as Suekai's outburst persisted, as the assaults on Alex Eala became more aggressive and intimate, there was a shift in the president's manner. The grin disappeared. His jaw set, his eyes, which had been idly looking around the space, focused on the Thai journalist with intense concentration. Several witnesses have described the incident as sensing the room's temperature fell 10 degrees all of a sudden. What followed will be instructed in political science. Lessons and examined via diplomacy specialists for many years to come. The President Bongbong Marcos, the head of an independent country, sprang up slowly, not in a panic, but with careful, deliberate motion. The scratching of the chair was sliced through by the floor. The speech of Suekai was like a knife. Every eye in the room instantly changed to the president. Safety employees stiffened, uncertain of what was taking place. Other officials were frozen in location, and Suekai for a short second. His rhetorical onslaught failed as he noted that the Philippine president was approaching him. However, Yun's conceit, his decades of frightening others with his inquiries, his feeling of being untouchable as a member of the media forced him to go on. Even though President Marcos bridged the gap between them, even if the whole space held its breath as a group, Yun spoke and continued to assault, apparently thinking that his position as a journalist would shield him from whatever ramifications. That was his deadly mistake. Suekai was contacted by President Marcos and without hesitating, without questioning authorization, without any diplomatic politeness, took hold of the removing the journalist's microphone, nor tactfully nor as a courteous request. He was ripped it away with power, using force, with clear purpose. The powerful sound of the microphone roared from the speakers of like a gunshot in the press room. Yun stood there, mouth still open, arms still outstretched, open mid-sentence where the microphone had been, all of a sudden and utterly quiet in the most as literally as possible. The space exploded. In exclamations. Shutters for cameras went nuts. Security personnel moved forward by half a stride. Prior to understanding that this posed no hazard, instead of their president making a declaration, other authorities seemed too immobilized and unaware of how to respond to such an unusual procedural violation. Moreover, Suekai, the individual who had invested decades causing discomfort to others' inquiries, were now the ones feeling quite uncomfortable. He was examined his empty hand. He raised his gaze at the president, who was looming above him, and for the first time in most likely throughout his career, he had nothing at all to express. Marcos, the president, held the microphone, unlike a politician regarding to deliver a speech, but like a parent possessing proof of misconduct, such as a shield-wielding guardian. He didn't have to speak out. He didn't have to start a long defense. All he had to do was create a border, to create a line that said, then he said, enough is enough. 12 phrases. Simply 12 straightforward, devastating, well-chosen phrases that penetrate all the commotion, noise, and conflict with surgical accuracy. Searching first straight into Sataki Yun's eyes, maintaining eye contact with a level of intensity that made the reporter clearly unpleasant, followed by panning that same ardent gaze around the room, ensuring that everyone in attendance comprehended the message. Bong, the President Bong Marcos said in a tone that was serene yet utterly uncompromising. I'll not let anybody to unjustly attack her. That was all. 12 words that immediately became the most discussed quotation in Southeast Asian politics and sports. 12 phrases that summed up all about leadership, defense, and taking a stance for what is just. He didn't dispute that the tennis matches points. He didn't argue over officiating or draw good fortune. He refrained from launching into a defending remarks on Filipino pride or international relations. He just established a non-negotiable truth that 20-year-old Alex Eala champion, who has just accomplished something amazing, wouldn't be harassed on his observe. The impact of those 12 words wasn't just in their words, but in way they were presented. There wasn't President Marcos's voice was filled with rage, but absolute power was in place. There was no begging, but there was clear command. It was a leader's voice, who has just determined that procedure and diplomacy could be subordinated to fundamental human dignity. The voice was that of a country declaring, "We won't be disrespected. We won't permit our heroes to be destroyed, and if you cross this line, there will be repercussions." Following the delivery of that terrible declaration, President Marcos did not give returning the microphone to Swakayan. That would have recommended the reporter may have another opportunity to strike. Rather, he set it firmly on the table, making it a symbolic gesture that said, "This discussion is over," he said, turning away from a diplomatic snub by a Thai journalist it couldn't be missed, and strolled over to Alex Eala's seat. He was put a shielding hand over her shoulder, an action that was concurrently paternal and presidential, and bent down to murmur anything that brought her joy go back to her face. Sutaka Yun was abandoned, standing there, embarrassed and flushed, going through something very few journalists ever face, being publicly humiliated by a foreign leader in his own country turf. He made an attempt to speak, to object to the microphone, but his voice was engrossed in what came next. Someone began to applaud in the room. Next, one person joined in, followed by another. In a matter of seconds, a surge of cheers was constructing in that conference room for the journalists. The Filipino media was where it all began. Intrinsically dependent, yet it spread. Journalists from throughout the world joined participate. Maybe even some Thai reporters, understanding that their coworker had gone too far, started cheering. They weren't celebrating politics. They weren't celebrating nationalism. They were praising the idea. They were commemorating the fact that someone in power had used its authority to defend a young athlete from an unjust assault. Let's examine this in more detail. What just transpired, since this is much larger than a single press moment of the conference. We're at a time when politicians are very computed. Each word has a focus group. Each action is examined by groups of advisors. Leaders cautiously hide behind carefully written comments made available via press secretaries. They stay away from conflict, particularly on international soil, due to the diplomatic consequences may be dire. For a president in office to physically participate in a news conference in order to really remove a microphone from the hands of a journalist in another nation are almost unheard of in contemporary politics. From a diplomatic perspective, this ought to be a nightmare. This ought to result in an international event. This ought to lead to official apologies, severe phone conversations between foreign ministries. However, this is what the conventional diplomats don't get it. This is what the political experts seated in there are no air-conditioned offices. Within the public opinion court, what President Marcos did was being praised as utterly heroic. Inside the video clip shows hours of this occurrence. Of Marcos grabbing the microphone and saying those 12 heartless phrases has become quite popular. We're conversing millions of views on every social media outlet. The Marcos hashtag Eala's protection is popular all across the globe. Filipino communities worldwide are having fun. Even those who have never seen a game of tennis in their lives. Even those who are indifferent to the politics of Southeast Asia are less posting this video, as it illustrates something that individuals are in dire need of, eager for the image of a contemporary leader both at home and abroad. He is no longer only a political person, having a convoluted family history, He's now a leader who got up and did something and defended his people when it had an impact. Moving ahead, the questions are intriguing to think about. How are you going to this has an impact on upcoming press conferences at international athletic competitions? Well, before beginning, journalists consider their options. Violent assaults against athletes, being aware that there could be repercussions beyond merely backlash on social media. Will other leaders feel empowered to adopt comparable behaviors when their athletes are handled unjustly? Has President Marcos established a new standard for how leaders of state should interact with unethical media lines? We are aware that this moment has attracted the interest of individuals worldwide. It ignited numerous discussions about leadership, sportsmanship, and the media's role in safeguarding youth in the limelight, regarding pride in one's country and about resisting bullies. These are discussions that go much beyond the particular environment of a single news conference at a single sports occasion. This is now considered a cultural moment, with consequences that will spread ahead for many years. Regarding Sukayan, for me, this is probably going to be a pivotal point in his career, but not how he had hoped. Rather of being recalled as a courageous reporter who posed difficult inquiries, he will be regarded as the guy who assaulted a 20-year-old champion and was publicly humiliated by a president for it. His name will always be connected to this event. Each and every whenever a person composes his biography or makes a professional profile, the moment will take front stage. It's a warning about the distinction between combative reporting and straightforward brutality. As we conclude this amazing narrative, let's return to Alex Eala herself, because at the heart of everything this dispute and the drama surrounding it are a 20-year-old sportsman who accomplished something very amazing. She put an end to a 26-year drought. She took home the gold on unfriendly area. She kept up her calm in the face of extreme stress. She served her nation with honor and superiority. Additionally, after her biggest victory, she was assaulted unjustly by someone who ought to have more familiar. However, she also encountered something that very few athletes really do. She saw her president defend her in the clearest, most straightforward manner feasible. She discovered that her country really has her back. Additionally, that lesson, that confirmation, that defense will be with her for the remainder of her profession. The picture shows Alex Eala grinning once again after President Marcos's whisper to her after the placement of that shield hand on her shoulder as he stopped talking her assailant is the ideal conclusion to this narrative. It demonstrates that despite everything the dispute and all the fuss, what the most important thing is that a young champion felt shielded and encouraged. That she may have her glorious moment, without having it entirely eclipsed by brutality. That she was able to keep her head up, understanding that when someone attempted to destroy her, the president was there to rebuild her up. This is the tale of the 33rd Games in Southeast Asia that no one will forget. Not the outcomes of other occurrences, not the opening, not the medal ceremonial, this instant, this conflict, this assertion of pride and safety. This is what will be recalled. This is what's going to be shown in documentaries. This is what will be taught at educational institutions. This is what will motivate next generations of leaders and athletes. Since at its fundamentally, this tale is about something essential to the human condition. The one to shield those who are unable to completely defend themselves. The readiness to confront bullies regardless of the ramifications. And the ability to say enough is sufficient. So, what are your thoughts? Champions? Was Marcos the president? You have every right to use that microphone. And stop Sithkai's assault? Did that? Thai journalists get precisely what he merited for attempting to harass a young champion? Or do you believe that the president went too far and ought to have handled it in a different way? This is a dialogue. It will continue to rage for weeks and months, and I'd want to hear your viewpoint. Share your opinions in the comments below. Tell me your position on this. Do you believe that more leaders had to adhere to President Marcos's example